I'd like to introduce our special guest speaker, Harry Doctor Jr. Harry is a multifaceted network engineer working as the IT infrastructure manager for West Windsor-Plainsboro Regional School District. He has a passion for technology and has received training and holds certificates across VMware, Microsoft, and Cisco. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity to talk about how we're using VMC on AWS. We really appreciate the time and dedication that everybody put forth into bringing us on here today.
Great. Welcome, Harry. We're really happy to have you here today. As you know, with West Windsor-Plainsboro Regional School District, we know it's a mid-sized public school district with 10 schools, over 10,000 students, and you have a single data center and supporting technology services that you're delivering to teachers, students, and administrators. I'd really love to hear a little bit of background on how long you've been using VMware Cloud on AWS and why you went that way.
Well, we made the purchase in June of 2019, and at the time we reviewed Microsoft solution, Azure. We also reviewed AWS natively. And finally, we reviewed VMC on AWS. The biggest key point at that time, and which also exists today, was the ability to not only be to bring the workload up from on-prem to the cloud, it was just as equally as important to bring the workload back down. At that time, that was the only solution that could do that easily and natively, all while keeping the VM powered on, going from A to B and back from B to A. They all were similarly priced, but that was the biggest key component. The second component was the learning aspect. It's hard enough, especially with the world the way it is now in the COVID environment, to then retrain the staff, whether I go out to training or learn training remotely, or I send some of the higher engineers that report to me out. It was just trying to how do you get everybody up to speed in a quick time frame? So just the simple fact that everybody already knew VMware, they knew it like the back of their hand. It was, to go from VMware on-prem to VMC on AWS, it wasn't that big of a jump. So those were the two key components that made us select VMC on AWS.
That's awesome. And, being able to go to the cloud and come back, what did that really do for your organization? What benefits did that bring to you?
To be honest with you, there's actually a lot of benefits. But I guess some of the more important benefits are if we ever need to do any type of maintenance, whether it's server firmware, we standardize on Cisco UCS, and there's firmware that comes out on the UCS Blade servers pretty much quarterly. So we can then move those virtual servers that are running on those physical servers that would be impacted up to the cloud. And when we first purchased the solution back in 2019, at the later half of 2019, we always still did everything just because I always want to be for sure, like 100% as close as possible. We always did everything overnight on weekends. But after working with the solution, we got so comfortable. Now we still do it after hours just in case. But over these last 6 months, we just do things right in the middle of the day. So we just move the workloads up. Once we verify that the workloads are indeed up there, then we go ahead and we perform the necessary maintenance on the physical servers that would be impacted. And then we either manually move them back down or we schedule them come back down at night. And then we do the health checks, which are manual, just to make sure everything made it back down from the cloud safely. And then in some instances, for some options, we just leave them up there. Depends upon what it is, how long it's going to take to come back down, things of that nature. But there have been some things that we talked about moving up and moving back down. They just ended up staying up there.
Yeah, it sounds like it gives you a lot of flexibility, which it's got to be great. And speaking of that, this was in place before, unfortunately, the COVID pandemic kind of hit everybody. So what has this done for your response in COVID-19? Has this helped with that?
Absolutely. So we are a pretty big, at least as far as school districts in New Jersey are concerned, VDI environment. We have 500 seats, and we were actually, once COVID actually hit in February or so, March of 2020, there were a lot of talks about, all right, what do we do? How do we support learning virtually and things like that? What does that look like? How do we get enough concurrent desktops so that everybody, our staff that need to use virtual desktops at home and our students that need to use virtual desktops at home to complete various assignments, what does that look like? So upon calling the reseller and reaching out to the big people, whether it be Dell or Cisco or HP or IBM, we came to realize that to get a server with our current, the specs that we were looking for, it was just going to be a long time frame. Extremely long time frame. So we just sat down and we just whiteboarded it out, how much resources that we currently had in AWS, VMC and AWS versus what we were going to need to purchase. So decision was easy. What we originally purchased VMC on AWS for was disaster recovery. And then within a matter of a couple of days, we were able to kind of shift that mindset and basically say, all right, no more disaster recovery. We're actually in a disaster. We're in a pandemic. The servers are not going to be coming for at least 3 months. There's nothing that anybody can do. You can't pay any more money to anybody to make them come any faster. So let's just take this environment, and that was going to be once used for disaster recovery, and let's just use it for live. Let's just use it for primary. So we moved enough virtual servers up in order to free up enough physical servers to run those virtual desktops that we needed to. And we were able to do that within a matter of about a week and a half, 2 weeks. And it would have been a lot faster, but we moved things with caution because we never moved that many things up. We never moved that many virtual servers up before. But everything worked out as expected, and we actually didn't need to make any purchases for any servers at all.
Yeah, that's great. And being able to move that many workloads so quickly is pretty impressive. Do you have a cloud migration or a cloud strategy, a formal one in place today?
Do we have anything in place today? That's a great question. No, there is no strategy or migration currently in place today. What we do is when there is a server that is approaching end of life, when we're about 9 months out to a year, we do an evaluation based upon what's running on that specific cluster. And are we going to renew and purchase a new set of servers in that cluster or migrate them to the cloud? There have been some instances since COVID hit back in March of 2020, where we have evaluated, we have about 3 or 4 clusters, and each cluster has multiple servers, a minimum of 5, some have as many as 8. And we said, all right, what is this going to look like in 6 months? What's it going to look like in a year from now? Does it make sense to collapse these 5 to 8 physical servers and purchase more? Or does it make sense just to purchase additional resources up in VMC on AWS? So we're having those types of discussions right now. That's kind of the next step. And we need to have those decisions ready by March of 2021.
Okay. And in those discussions, where do you see, West Windsor-Plainsboro going with VMC in the next 18 to 24 months? Do you have any kind of idea of where you might be heading?
That's a great question. So what I can say, at least at this point, since nobody really can answer the $1 million question, when is this all going to be over? And I want to be fair to everybody as far as the healthcare system and things like that, and everybody that they're trying to do and getting everybody back to work and trying to make America the way it was prior to this pandemic hitting. It's a little bit difficult, a little bit of a challenge to answer that question. But if things were normal, I would say, if things were regular, traditional, within the next year and a half, 2 years, if we had to replace, say, 10 servers, we would probably only maybe purchase 3 or 4. And then we may request for an additional server or 2 up in AWS. It's simply things like the resiliency, all always on. You can do the migrations, less maintenance. I don't have to worry about firmware updates for the items that go up there. I just have to worry about patches for the Windows servers that we have up there. But you would have to worry about that or be concerned about that if they were on-prem as well. So, but it's more of the infrastructure that the servers run on that has to be properly maintained, that you don't, that becomes no longer an issue if the servers aren't physically residing in your data center.
Okay. And I just want to make sure, I understand that you were running Horizon servers in the cloud, and you freed up local infrastructure to run them by moving your workloads to the cloud. Is that correct?
Close. So what we did was we had some database servers, quite a few of them, had a couple domain controllers, and just regular, just standard servers that we had on-prem. Those types of servers were moved to the cloud. That allowed for the physical servers that those virtual servers were running on to be freed up. And the physical servers on-prem are what we use to increase our footprint for VDI.
Okay. And have you been able to measure the impact on the students with this flexibility and the uptime and making sure that you were able to support them when they also went remote?
Right. So that's another great question. I think the hardest thing in trying to provide resources externally, at least in a fully hybrid model, meaning a set of students that actually come in versus students that stay home. Because when COVID first started back in March of 2020, and we got the call saying that we were going to be out starting, pretty much effective almost immediately. It was just like, what do we do? How do we get these things to the staff and students, and how quickly can we get there? Because the tech team, even though the staff and students were going to be home, the tech team was still coming in every day. And for the most part, we still come in almost every day. We have a schedule, but that's either here nor there. But as far as the students and their resources, once we made the migration to move the virtual servers up to the cloud, and we increased our footprint of VDI, then the next question became, how do they run these virtual desktops on the devices that they were provided? And we issued every student either an iPad or a Chromebook or some type of device so that they can actually get to a virtual desktop. And we've had a good level of success in doing so.
That's great. So you talked about uptime, and it's a big part of the equation. How quickly can you pull a VM down with VMC on AWS, or even push one out to the cloud?
That's a great question. I don't like it when people don't give me a straight answer. What I will tell you is I don't like when people talk in theory. I will tell you this: we have 2 5-gig internet connections. One's at one data center and one's at another, 5 gig. And they both come into VMC on AWS. On a VM that is 100 gigabytes, if it is in the middle of the day, considering from 6 a.m. to about 6 p.m., it can get there from our data center up to the cloud in about 18 to 25 minutes, which is great. To come back down, it's generally about the same. It's oftentimes a little bit less. If it is outside of 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., you can take off about 25%. So it's about 25% faster. Not really sure why. Maybe there's just something, the amount of traffic that's coming into Amazon or leaving out of Amazon. It's hard to say. But our primary data center is the one down in Virginia. That's the one we go to. We thought about going to the one over in Ohio, but we're coming down into the one that's in Virginia. So it's about 18 to 25 minutes for one VM that's about 100 gigabytes in size. But that's a great question.
That's awesome. So you were a VMware shop before you purchased VMware on AWS. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. We've had VMware since 2008. Back when there was ESXi 3.x or maybe 2.5. So we've had VMware for quite some time, and it does what it needs to do.
So can you talk to me about the benefit and the transition for your team to go to VMware Cloud on AWS, having all this institutional knowledge about VMware? How was that transition for you?
That's a very good question. The transition was very simple. We got a couple of books that we found online. We just ordered them from Amazon.com, actually. And, we found some different material online, read through a couple of white papers, but it mainly just came down to just doing it, because it went from how do we go from this infrastructure that we currently have to deal with on-prem only up to the cloud? What does that look like? What's going to be different? And then all of a sudden, we kind of get thrown in this, a little bit of a curveball with the pandemic, but we were able to figure it out, and we had to figure it out within a matter of weeks. And I would say it was definitely less than 2-3 weeks. And, we're still learning. The main thing is, obviously, you have to make sure that different things are up to the one main thing in AWS, and this is not a bad thing, it's not a good thing, it's just something to be aware of. VMC on AWS, is the updates occur pretty much, it feels like weekly, even though it may be weekly, but it also puts you in a great position to ensure that your vCenter on-prem is up to speed. Now, we've been running vCenter 7 for quite some time, maybe about a week after it was generally available. We were running it in production. We were running it in beta before that, but we were running it in production about a week after. And when you have the two connected, when you're connected with the vCenter and your vCenter that's up in the cloud, it kind of puts you in a position where you have to stay current. But upgrading vCenter is a lot easier than upgrading all the servers and all the infrastructure and everything else that you have to upgrade on-prem. So I hope that answers that question.
It does. Now that you've been out on VMC on AWS for a while, you're getting used to it. Have you started to look at or start consuming native services?
At this time, we actually have. That is a great question. So we leverage application called Cloudberry. And then we have a couple of S3 buckets. We have a S3 bucket, we have Glacier buckets, and we have the tiering set up between them. So basically, if an employee chooses to resign, or they're doing a transfer, or maybe they're taking some time off from the organization, we'll just go with the very first scenario. So if an employee puts in his or her notice and they're retiring, which happens all the time in school districts, that people choose to retire after 25 years or more of service, or even less for whatever that reason. We will then move your items from on our physical SAN over to an S3 bucket. Once it is there for about 6 months, then it just moved down to a Glacier bucket automatically. And that's just something that we've been following. We've actually did that. We actually were Amazon customers prior to being VMC on AWS customers. And that's something that we've been doing for a good number of years now, just to kind of free up storage on the SAN. And also we're reducing the footprint of the SAN as well. So if this time 3 years ago, we had about 500 terabytes. In 2020, December 4th, as of this recording, we have just under 300 terabytes. So there isn't a need to keep purchasing terabytes and terabytes and terabytes of space, because there's quite a bit of space up there in AWS.
Quite a bit, yeah. We like to think it's never going to end. But I'm still, so with all this like reduction in your on-site, are you seeing cost reductions across the board?
Absolutely. From the SAN to the just the infrastructure and the UCS costs from the storage, and then just overall the day-to-day operations, like the man or personnel that it took to run everything. You can do everything pretty much, unless something physically goes down with the connection, everything you can do remotely. So as opposed to if a server goes down, or say if there's 3 servers to go down or 4 servers that just, for whatever reason, there's a disaster. But if the stuff's running up there, that's number one. And number two, you do not lose connectivity. And if we lose connectivity, which has happened out of one of our data centers, we still have the other data center, which is another 5 gig connection coming in. And, as long as you have connectivity and you have the resources up there, you're good to go as far as that's concerned. As far as a reduction in cost, we're definitely saving a lot of money on our storage area network. We're definitely saving a ton of money on heating and cooling, because to have 300 terabytes versus 500 terabytes it's a lot more to cool. And to have all the virtual servers that we physical servers that we used to have this time a year ago, or maybe 2 years ago, we don't have that same type of, inventory in our data centers. So as time progresses in 2021, 2022, the decision is no longer, is this cloud compatible? The decision more so is, okay, we're going to run it in the cloud. Do we have enough resources in the cloud available in order to run it? That's kind of the mindset now.
Okay. And I think one other thing I'd like to really talk about, because disaster recovery is kind of what you started with. Can you talk about how that goes for you on VMware Cloud and AWS? My understanding is you received a 5-minute recovery point objective with this. Can you talk to us about that?
That is correct. So, quick note: the closest we've got the recovery point objective is maybe about 10 minutes. So okay. 5 is great. 5 is more of a salesy thing. Maybe other people have done it, but the closest we've gotten is about maybe 7 to 10 minutes, more so closer to the 10-minute mark. But the recovery point objective is also another great thing in terms of backups, recovery, disaster, and things like that. That's just something that, somebody once told me when I first got started in IT about 10, 12 years ago, they said, you're only as good as your last backup. And, I do this thing called a fire drill, pretty much quarterly with my team, where I remove something on purpose. I don't tell them, I tell them I don't tell them what it is, but I let them know the server that it was removed from. And they have to put it back in a time frame. And the time frame window is pretty tight. So in the event that happens in the real world, and it happens quite often, where people delete stuff by accident, something didn't get backed up, you try to restore something, and what you thought was being backed up, you can't restore because it's corrupt, or whatever the case may be. I mean, there's a lot of reasons. But I think putting those individuals in position along with myself, and then just letting it run its course, as opposed to life's going to deal you a level of stress regardless in IT, regardless, just like anything else, any other position. But you're only as good as your last backup or your last 2 backups. So you better have something. You better have something you can restore, and you better have something that's pretty recent. You can't go back 6 months, because that's just going to create another whirlwind of problems. So if you just put people in a position that they are doing things so much and so often that when the lights come on and standing on the big stage, they're not as nervous. You're setting them up for great success.
That's great. Yeah, I really appreciate you coming to talk to us about this incredible journey you've been on, really being able to migrate, so many applications in such a short period of time, making sure your 10,000 students are always up and able to learn with your teachers, reducing your costs. It's a very compelling journey that you've been on, and really appreciate you coming to talk to us. Before we wrap up, is there anything else that you would like to talk to the audience about?
There's a couple of things. First, I would like to say, I'm not able to be in this position that I'm in as a leader of my team without them. My team is great. They afford me the ability to be able to sleep well at night. There was a time a couple of years ago when before we got the VMC on AWS, where, as a manager or director or CF, whatever your title is, you're responsible for a lot. And you have to have a good team, and I have a great team. That's first and foremost. The second thing, to all the viewers that may be watching, whether now or later, the solution does work. There's going to be some things that you're going to need to be aware of, but some of the biggest key benefits are it does extend your existing infrastructure. That is one of the biggest things for us. So if you have certain VLANs carved out on-prem, you have certain security zones, whether it's on the DMZ or whatever the case is, you have a server VLAN or multiple server VLANs, just to be able to extend those VLANs up to the cloud. And it does work as easy as a couple checkboxes. So it's not like a gimmick, it's not like anything else, it's just that simple. That's something else that's huge. And the last but not least is for all school districts out there, I'm specifically referring to K-12. This is something that you may want to seriously consider. You know, I would definitely reach out to whoever it is your resellers are, and I would also see if they would offer something, even if you do it. We have a 3-node cluster up in VMC on AWS. I believe that there's a 2-node cluster. Does that sound right, Lord?
There is one, yes.
Right. So if you can even get the 2-node cluster as a starting point, you know, some of the headaches that you have to deal with, those middle of the night server failures, you know, inclement weather. We're in December, we're in the East Coast, and it's coming. You know, how bad it's going to be, nobody knows, you know, but those things that people should prepare for. So those are the 3 main things: my team, the extension of the existing network infrastructure, and, you know, just having us, you know, taking the courage, challenging all of the school district that may not have the solution or may not even have looked at the solution, you know, to start somewhere, maybe even start small and then start somewhere. Those are the 3 key points.
Okay, great. Appreciate that. And I'm sure everyone watching really appreciates you taking time to come and speak with them.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, and thanks for bringing us on. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much.